Good evening. It is Tuesday, May 16th, and we're here for our regular scheduled evening meeting starting at 7 o'clock. At this time, we have a full slate of commissioners. We have our administrator, and we have our consultant, and our clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of the April 25th, 2023 meeting minutes where we had technical difficulties and we didn't get a lot of the meeting on the recording, correct, Karen? We missed a lot of that meeting.
Yes.
So is there any additions, corrections, or revisions to the meeting minutes?
Nope.
They look good to me. Okay. Next, we'll move down to the approval of the vouchers. I believe we have two.
Yes. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $767,750.86 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,201,116.95 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 5.
Second with just a quick question.
There's been a motion and a second for the 5 items on the consent agenda with one question. Commissioner Peck.
Our county representative to the Workforce Development Organization is Commissioner Didier, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you're supportive of all these nominees?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second for the 5 consent items. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to public comment. Anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone or anybody? If you'd like to come forward, please.
Good evening, commissioners. Thanks for having me. My name is Jerry Martinez. I'm the executive director for the Downtown Pasco Development Authority. Earlier this month, we hosted a very successful Cinco de Mayo festival, and I'm just kind of on our tours and thank you. So I want to thank Franklin County as a whole and our county administrator, Mike Gonzalez, for just helping us make it a really great weekend. The presence and involvement of our Franklin County Sheriff and Benton Franklin Sheriff's Posse sort of elevated the sense of public safety during the weekend. And then it was really great to just see local leaders and so much of our public agencies and public departments out in front of community. And so just, thank you all for your partnership, and we look forward to partnering in the future. If you want to hear more about the event and a little bit more about the DPDA, we are hosting our monthly board meeting this Thursday at 5 p.m. at City Hall with also a virtual option for those of you that are interested. So, just thanks all, and thank you, Mike. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Sorry. Thank you, commissioners. I just wanted to kind of talk about a little bit on the road approach resolutions. I did some investigating, just going back, trying to figure out, the genesis of all that when it was originally passed, and it brought me back. Actually, I went all the way to 2002. But where I think it really, the last time before March 19th, 2014, it was passed on May 28th, 2003. It was 2003-284. And, oh, shoot, I left my binder or my notebook that had all my notes in it. But anyhow, the thing that was interesting about it was that I ended up listening to the March 19th, 214 meeting because the minutes, only give you so much. To really understand the context, I went and listened, and I learned that, first of all, Mr. Mahoney was saying the temporary access to the road is actually for if a farmer wanted to open another opening. It wasn't to replace, it wasn't required for him to get a farmer to get a permit every year to farm. That was just if he wanted to open up another area, which I kind of thought was curious because if you look at most Circles farms, they do have 2 openings if they're on the edge of the road. If they're deeper down, they're just going on to another dirt road. But the other thing was that it was really in 2003 that they ended up passing where you had to have this concrete pad, and that was, it had for different zones, it had different rules and different sizes, and really the only change in the 214 law was they added the conduit or not the conduit, all of a sudden I can't think of it. Covert pipe that underneath that before the county would pay for it, and from then on, they wanted people that were actually putting an approach onto the county road to pay for it. So looking at that, and the thing that I don't understand, and I still will not understand, and I feel like it's something that our commissioners, first of all, I think that the law needs to be explained why you have the temporary permit. Because Mr. Erdman had read it completely differently. And it's because the law doesn't really explain. So I think that I would really like our commissioners to relook at that and also to really look at why we would need asphalt or concrete between an approach to the road when the shoulders themselves are dirt and gravel. And that's just something that I wanted to bring up, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, public comment?
George Dockstetter. First off, I want to apologize for my language last week, but it's frustrating. People in the county normally don't make what the private enterprise pays. They work here because of security. They're going to get paid. They're going to get paid vacations. They're going to get insurance, and they're going to get retirement. Not one that I know of county employee missed a paycheck during COVID. Not one had his business closed down. Not one of them lost their job, and a lot of people went through misery, but I didn't hear anybody at the county was suffering. In fact, they were all working from home, and you couldn't get a doggone thing done because you had to do it over the computer because there wasn't anybody to answer the phone. So and you take probably the average county employee makes a heck of a lot more than the average citizen in Franklin County. Thank you.
Anybody else, public comment? Is there anybody on the phone?
We don't have anybody on the phone.
All right. Seeing nobody else coming to the mic, we'll move down to regular business. The creation of a Chief Criminal Deputy Prosecuting Attorney position presented by Mr. Sean Sant.
Thank you, Commissioners. One of the things that we're trying to address here is the increases. We've heard recently discussions with some of the challenges that we have with staffing in the Office of Public Defense, as well as staffing in my office as well. We've had some recent departures. Some of the incoming attorneys that we have are junior attorneys. Those that are recent graduates from law school require some additional training and supervision to do that. One of the complications as a criminal chief deputy, typically their caseloads will be lower so that they could participate in more of a management or supervisory role, dedicating time to working with junior prosecutors, being able to coach them up as well. Right now, we have 19 pending homicide cases, and typically I try those with my chief deputy. We've had to distribute those basically throughout my office, so pretty much any senior DPA or former DPA 2 positions that we had were assigned a homicide to work with another prosecutor on those. So unfortunately, our case numbers are rising. I think you have heard the issues addressed. We share those same concerns with the Office of Public Defense of obviously we need a system that is adequately funded and represented on both sides. One of the issues that this is trying to address is the need for creating some succession planning, but also to take on the additional responsibilities for training these junior deputies. We've recently had applications. These individuals that have applied are recent graduates from law school. So again, they're going to require additional supervision as a Rule 9 until they are actually licensed, meaning that we are probably looking at them not being a licensed attorney until close to October. That's usually when the bar results from the July bar will come out around the late September, early October. So that means that these individuals will not be able to fully function as an attorney in the office. They have to work with a supervisor within the office. This position is adding a position so that we would have 2 of our chiefs on the criminal side, and this would offset the workload that is currently assigned to just 1. That attorney obviously has picked up a significant amount of cases over the last few years, in part due to the COVID, the shutdown of courts. We weren't able to get a lot of these cases tried. Again, these are the more serious cases that typically don't resolve in some other negotiated process. These are cases of homicide, rape, your very serious cases, armed assaults, et cetera, where the individual accused is facing many years in prison. Typically, those cases don't resolve short of a trial. So that is why one of the reasons that we're asking for this is to add an additional supervisory level attorney. We haven't had an additional need for a supervisory attorney before. Now, where our office is with the loss of existing employees or existing experienced prosecutors taking other opportunities elsewhere, we're going to need additional resources to train them. So that's why we've put this together to request that. It's been our review that we can use the ARPA funding for meeting this need. It addresses a significant need in the county. And likewise, I would think that the same funding mechanism would be used for helping to assist the Office of Public Defense with their needs as well, being able to use that resource for the temporary hiring. I recognize that the board has typically had reservations when we're using funds that are only temporary in nature. My understanding is these funds would exist up until the end of 2025, which is probably about the time that we would need to probably add an additional position before. I've addressed the board previously on trying to juggle resources that we have in the office. Some of our positions were hybrid positions where we would have, if we determined that they didn't have a sufficient caseload either in child support or handling district court matters, we've kind of shuffled around and assigned different things. I know one of the interests that has come up both at last year's budget hearing but also as recent as a couple weeks ago is the need for having additional review for civil matters. Creation of this position will help us to juggle those resources in part. One of our second requests is movement. We've been able to retain our current civil deputy that was looking at opportunities elsewhere. That's going to be our second request, but it looks like in combination of this request as well as the other request on the agenda tonight, that will give us the resources. We're still going to be down on the criminal side, but it will give us those additional resources to do the additional civil work that has been requested from the board, and talking with Mike to try to make sure that we give those resources and continued resources, not just to this board, but to the other departments as well. So anyway, we're asking for the board's approval of that. Again, this is a necessity based on the need for the training of junior attorneys that are coming with little to no prior experience, and hoping that we could get the board's approval for that. Any questions from the commissioners?
Questions, commissioners?
The amount of the ARPA funding that you're looking for is how much?
I believe we'd be looking for the amount that's available for it, because we can't use those funds for certain other things. Or if we were to use ARPA funds for this, to fund this for the next 2 years, that would be a position, I think we identified in there as 105 to 141 plus the benefits. That's basically the range for whoever would fill the criminal chief position. And so we're asking for that to be funded with the ARPA funds for those 2 years, because it is a temporary use. We feel that within 2 years, we'd probably be asking to fill another position. And so by doing this now and using those funds when it comes time to request additional funding from the county to keep those positions ongoing to meet the current needs, then the ARPA funding would drop off, and then that would be just added as a regular employee added within our budget. So the total estimate specifically is the 105 to 141 range, depending on who fills that position. That is the range for that grade.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So it states here that you have 3 positions open right now.
That's correct.
What are you doing about filling those?
Like I said, we just had a recent interview. Looks like we're going to be extending an offer to one of those applicants, and we're continuing our recruitment efforts and trying to get it. But this person, if they do accept, they're a junior member as well. And so the individuals that we already have in our office are junior level. They're going to require some additional supervision, but typically they would come. The new person would come in, take over in district court or in juvenile, and those existing deputy prosecutors there would then move into the felony. And so they would be a DPA 2 position, but they would take on the felony caseload and work up that way. And so this is basically to assist us with the supervision and training of newer attorneys, because it looks like right now, even if we were to extend an offer to this individual that has applied, they won't actually be fully licensed with the bar until October, after the bar results from July.
So do you believe your office is, the attendance of your staff is equal to pre-COVID? Are they in the office, or are they working from home?
Oh, yes. We do 1 day a week working remote, and that continues review of cases and things like that. And that's basically an adjustment that's allowed through many other employers, trying to be competitive, looking at what other counties have done, allowing attorneys to do remote. But our attorneys, and just to make a comment earlier, our staff, or our office was staffed. We had people in the office answering the phones all during COVID. We had attorneys in the office. In fact, the courts, everything was running, and I'm pretty sure every other department was here as well, because I know people were in the auditor's office, assessor's office as well. So that came up, and there was question whether or not we were here. We had business to do. Business kind of continued for us during COVID, just like normal. We had to make sure that we were working with our sheriff's office to balance the numbers of people that were coming into the jail, because we knew once the court shut down and we were no longer able to conduct trials, we had to be very sensitive of that and try to triage handling the most serious cases during that time. but also watching the numbers in the jail, because we always wanted law enforcement to ensure that they always had a place to bring criminals that were being arrested for new crimes. And we were able to do that during COVID through that collaborative effort.
So until we fill the 3 positions that you have vacant, we're creating a new one that we still have to fill too, correct?
That's correct. And that in
We
part
want to fill the 3 first before we ask.
is because we already have a need right now for the additional
Right.
workloads. And I recognize trying to recruit and hire if we are able to create this particular position, that will create a vacancy on a senior DPA line, because one of the things that we have to do is be able to recruit somebody that has already 5 years' experience, hopefully, doing significant felony level prosecutions. And so what this will do is we can't just recruit all junior attorneys.
The 3 that are open
3
are
that
all
are vacant,
junior?
those are DPA 2 and junior
Okay.
DPA positions. So what we're trying to do is we recognize that for this year, the salary impacts are probably going to be minimal, because it's going to take a while for us to fill those vacancy positions. But yes, ultimately, once we are fully staffed, and this position will be an additional supervisor position, but we're still essentially at that point going to have 4 vacant positions.
What threw me here, it says including the loss of a senior DPA, so I figured one of these was a
Right.
senior DPA.
Right. And so what we had is when we had Jen Johnson leave as our chief civil deputy, our senior, one of our most senior criminal prosecutors was Daniel Stover, who's now our new civil DPA. And so that position moved over. We had an existing attorney within the office that then had the requisite time period of 10 years, actually more than 10 years, but because he was changing roles as well, and we pulled him out of doing more of a junior level work, and we had to bring him into felony prosecutions, that filled that senior DPA slot. And so essentially, this is going to help us to be able to develop and coach the junior attorneys. And we're required, when they are Rule 9, we have to provide additional supervision as the court rules require until they are fully licensed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
No, just a comment, Commissioners. Sean and I have met several times on this issue, and I think what we have to remember is this all is within the backdrop of Benton County instilling $1 million to help recruit and retain their lawyers. So, we're competing with the folks across the river. And there is that symbiotic nature between OPD's deficits and the PA's office. So one cannot work without the other. So this is a real necessity in my mind, to retain employees, recruit, and, perhaps even be flexible with some bonuses to recruit people. So, I just think this is a necessity. It's just the day and age that we're in. And we need to compete with Benton and other jurisdictions that are facing the same problems that we are and issues. So, Sean and I have had several really good conversations about the real necessity of this.
Okay.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-152, creation of Chief Criminal Deputy Prosecuting Attorney position.
Second.
There's been a motion, a second, for Resolution 2023-152, the creation of a Chief Criminal Deputy Prosecuting Attorney position. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we have a movement of Jeff Briggs from Deputy Prosecuting Attorney 2 to Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, Resolution 2023-153. Mr. Sant.
Thank you, Commissioners. As I indicated briefly, Mr. Briggs, when he came to the county as a new Franklin County employee, he did come to the county with a significant amount of years of service in the municipal realm, serving, I believe it was Whitman County, as well as City of Pasco on various legal issues. We've looked at his experience. Typically, a senior DPA is one that has 5 or more years of significant experience. Because the loss of our chief civil deputy and the need to retain our experienced civil deputy within our department, we looked at the ability that we would have to evaluate his his experience and recognize that he does have the 10-plus years of municipal experience of being a practicing attorney for that long and primarily focused in civil. This also, we're able to retain him essentially from leaving elsewhere with the hopes that we would be able to move him to this position. This moved him essentially to a similar salary line that would have been offered elsewhere, but also puts him on track to recognize his years of experience. The adjustments that we're making within the office as well, by keeping him with the county, provides us to give that additional service level to the board. Once we're able to pull off his existing criminal caseload, he's always wanted to be a dedicated civil. And we, because of the need, we basically gave him a criminal casework one because he did want some experience of being able to hopefully get trial experience as well on criminal, but our civil workload has increased as well. And so by being able to pull the criminal, once we get those other positions fully staffed, this will be able to assist us in reaching the goals that the board has set forward of providing the additional reviews of the resolutions coming to the board, and it'll keep him for the long term from our discussions. So again, I'm simply asking the board, this is not basically a reclassification or anything like that on the position. It's basically recognizing the normal movement that we would have for someone within an office. Usually we do try to keep someone on our staff for 3 years, even though they might have considerable experience elsewhere. But I think our current situation as such, if we were going to try to expend the funds trying to recruit and replace a similarly experienced attorney, one, it would be a huge void in our office, but two, it's part of something that we're looking at of trying to retain someone that is happy here and keep them on. And it's basically, it's a natural progression with the position to move from a DPA to a senior DPA. As the board knows from earlier discussions, the stepping situation, when they move up to senior DPA, they drop to a step that's just the immediate raise or increase in salary, but that puts them on a track so that once they stay with the county over time, they'll be able to appreciate the increases that a senior DPA slot provides. So for this year, the budget impacts will be minimal because of our current vacancies of positions and shifting of positions. Once we fill those up, we anticipate that it would likely be a slight impact for the 2024 fiscal, and we've noted that as $13,000 for fiscal year 2024.
Commissioners' questions?
I have no questions.
If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-153, movement of Jeff Briggs from Deputy Prosecuting Attorney 2 to Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-153, movement of Jeff Briggs from Deputy Prosecuting Attorney 2 to Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to increase to the Office of Public Defense budget presented by Mr. Ziegler, who's also been known to be
I hate this thing. The situation I raised on Friday happened yesterday afternoon, so Mr. Dow, the one staff attorney that I have, is now going to be with Benton County effective June 1st. So instead of the 4-person felony panel that I budgeted for, we're down to 2. Just to give you an idea what we're up against, yesterday we finally covered 4 homicides at $100,000, $25,000 each. We got a volunteer to do another one at $25,000, so we covered those 5. It's my understanding we have 2 homicide suspects being extradited from Mexico, which will probably be another 200. So I didn't come here tonight to talk to you about long-range plans. I just do it day to day now, if not hour to hour. That's just about what we're down to. And the same conditions prevail right now that I've talked about since I've done the job. Nothing's changed. This money, the initial request that I made to you, quite frankly, I'm just trying to compete with Benton County.
We're a little behind.
What?
They got $1 million, you're asking for 300,000.
Well, it'll keep us going for a while. In other words, I don't even like asking for the 300,000, but I'm stuck here. The conditions that we're working under haven't changed. And somebody's gonna have to change them, and I think it's gonna have to come from somebody higher than the counties. I'm sorry, but I just think that's the way the game has been set up. And I think your hands in a lot of ways are tied. And that's the best we can do with what we've got right now. I'm gonna use part of this money for probably the most active recruiting and advertising. I talked today with a local bar. But I'm gonna go all out. I'm just gonna do, and it's not gonna be that we haven't tried before. But at least now, if you approve this, I'll have something to offer, that at least we can be competitive with what's across the Blue Bridge.
Commissioners, questions?
So, Mr. Ziegler, working with Wasack for a number of years now, we've fought this battle at the state level with the governor and with the legislature, and their response is always the same.
Yeah?
You've got taxing authority, have your citizens pay for it. Like many people, I'm of the opinion that it's an unfunded mandate. Wasack is already working on litigation against the state to try and break this. Until then, obviously, we've got an obligation to fund. The only question or concern I have about the request is whether or not, and I don't see anybody from the auditor's office, I don't see anything offhand in this movement of funds. There's 4 different funds identified in the resolution. They're not named, but the numbers are there. And it looks like it originates out of ARPA funds and flows through the reserve account on its way to your budget. And I don't know that there's any sort of a hearing requirement. I think we're still within our overall budget for the county. That's the only question or concern I have, and I don't know who all coordinated on this, but if somebody can answer that question, it would give me a little more comfort, just to make sure we don't want to have to come back and revisit this if a public hearing is required.
No, those numbers came from the auditor. When I looked at them, I quite candidly, I started to feel like Hunter Biden. I mean, I thought I was going to be setting up offshore accounts the way the thing was from here to here to here to here to here before it got to me.
Yeah, well, I went through the budget and pulled the various numbers, and, you know, number one is out of expenditures and uses out of American Rescue Plan funds. That's pretty clear. 2, frankly, I couldn't find that number in the budget. 101180-39,119. And then the third one was moving the money into the reserve fund, which is 101-758-01. That one makes sense. But then back to the fourth one is the one that actually puts it into the Superior Court contracts account, which is yours. So I guess in reflection, I'm probably able to identify 3 of the 4, which maybe for me is better than average. I don't know. But anyway, I don't know of anything that requires a hearing, so I'm just putting it out there in case somebody does. Somebody says, oh, shoot, you know, we should have done that. I just don't know the answer. So I'm putting it out there. I'm willing to go ahead and support it. If it turns out that it did require some sort of a hearing, we can revisit next week, but I'm hoping somebody knows the answer to that question.
I don't know if a hearing's required specifically, but those are specifically on where to transfer from, I guess, to where.
You might want to come to the mic.
Yeah, I think the one thing in my mind that might trigger it is if you move out of current expense into a miscellaneous account and back, and not knowing where that one fund is, I don't know for certain that it's not a miscellaneous account, a separate account from the roads account or a current expense. That's the one thing I can think of that might trigger it. I don't think it does, but I was hoping somebody knew.
He explained it to me that we are essentially moving from ARPA funds into, oh darn,
The reserve account.
I think so.
Yeah,
based on
but
how
there's
it's-
one in between there
And
that,
he made it seem, so the first one, it goes to ARPA, that is just to have authorization to use the funds. And then that second transfer is to make it allowable that we can spend those funds. That's how it was explained to me.
okay, well then the second account in the chain, 101-180-39000119, must be some sort of an ARPA-related fund that authorizes its use.
That's above my pay grade.
I-
I got it from Tim.
Sure, I read everything I could find on it. I don't think it's a problem, and I'm willing to take the gamble and come back next week if we have to fix it, but I thought I ought to bring it up in case somebody knew the answer.
I can follow up with the auditor's office as well tomorrow.
Okay, it's probably fine. Tim is pretty reliable, but when I can't find that actual budget line anywhere in our budget, it necessitates asking the question. Okay, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve Resolution 2023-154 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-154, increase to the Office of Public Defense budget. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to the Historical Preservation Committee discussion.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Davidson.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. The reason for today is, you notice there's no read-aheads on this because I've been working to try to get this particular issue resolved. This is one of the things that's been pushed kind of in the back burner just because of higher priority items. But and as my days here get shorter, I wanted to kind of get this cleaned up and not leave Mike with this task. We've been working hard on compiling all of our historical grant program information and then compiling new reports for and forms to use for the committee. And it came to writing up the policy paper, and there was just a couple key things I thought would be good to just workshop with the board to get their consensus, or to try to see where you gentlemen are at, so that I could bring something that is agreeable to you the first time, like I said, because time's getting short here for it. So it basically involves committee makeup and the historical committee, the newly created one, the committee makeup, and a couple other items. And so if you don't mind, I'll just dive right into those. Right now, we're kind of still patterning this somewhat after what they do at Benton County very successfully. The three members, there'd be a 5-member committee. 3 standing members, if you would be the chair, which is the county auditor or their designee. The vice chair would be the county treasurer or their designee. And the third member is the county administrator or their designee. The primary responsibilities for those 3 positions, going back to the chair, would be to administer and promote the committee's work within the community. The vice chair, the county treasurer, oversees the budget for historical preservation, puts forward the budget during budget time, and monitors compliance of that. And then the third member, the county administrator, would basically help execute the agreements, which of course need a board concurrence, and also do a 1-year, something that we've never done before, do a 1-year compliance report with our with the grantees, making sure that the funds were legitimately spent to what they were supposed to be spent for, which is an important element that I'd like to add to the requirements. So those are the 3. Then there's 2 additional positions. At Benton County, they leave those 2 members up to the previous 3 to appoint. So they go out and find people, hopefully with some expertise in historical preservation. I would like to maybe possibly ask you if you would entertain that normally you would require them to be a county resident. I think that there may be merit to having the option of at least one of these members not be a county resident if you were able to get someone with this type of historical preservation expertise on the committee. So there you have it. That's the basic question. Those are kind of things I didn't want to take a guess at and see see how close I could come up with what you guys had in mind. I wanted to kind of just have, like, if you will, a workshop just real quickly and see if those thoughts, if you kind of concur with those, or if there's something in there that you'd like to see me do differently so that I can bring you a finished a policy for approval in the next week or two.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Commissioners, discussion.
My recollection is that this same funding source is used for the preservation of county records. Is that right, Mr. Beaton?
Yes.
No?
Oh.
Mr. Beaton, would you please come to the mic so
I've,
everybody can hear?
I've heard two versions. One is that it is and the other isn't.
There's two, this is the commissioner's dollar, I believe, for the historical funds, and then the preservation of documents is a different, fund. And so it's completely separate. This is specifically for historical funds, and there is actually quite a bit of money for historical document preservation, which is a different pot.
Yeah, well, your fund, we cannot use that for outside entities, and so that's for preservation of things here.
Right.
Right, and we just recently used the auditor's fund with Matt's blessing on getting Karen's files here. We got those, we hired Mary Withers, a former clerk of the board, who's come and done an excellent job at getting our back office here cleaned up, and those records are being shipped to the archives.
And I would note that the O&M fund that preserves the documents, which I know everybody has used, does have a committee that's made up of all of the recipient members as well as myself. And
Yeah, this
so-
is separate.
Yeah,
this
well, but I'm
isn't-
just saying it's the same, it'd be a similar model to set up a committee for the historical money, as Franklin County has one set up for the allocation of whether the coroner, or I know the clerk uses it frequently to buy, particular things for the legal file, that kind of stuff, so.
So just to come back to my question, if I could. Two separate funds, one for preserving our county records and documents, separate fund for historic preservation activities, which could be in or out of the county. Is that correct? Could we strike that? Could be restoration of a county asset, like maybe this building?
I believe that, actually, now that you mention that, I think in the past, I can't remember, there was discussions, and I think that it could qualify, yes. I think there is historical preservation, the courthouse
Right.
and other things, yes.
So
I do
that-
believe that's been used in other counties.
So we've got the one fund, which is county records and docs, and that's separate. Thank you for clarifying that. The other fund could be used, I believe, if I remember right, it can be used for county assets and structures for historic preservation, as well as ones in the county. I've not heard or seen anything that would allow it for use outside the county. I realize nobody is suggesting that, but what comes to mind are bridges sometimes, like up in Wenatchee, they've got bridges that span two counties, and sometimes there's a question about that. So that's helpful clarification. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So it looks good to me. I don't know what the other two commissioners, but it looks like you got a good committee set up.
I would be interested in hearing, Mr. Beaton, apologies, I should have asked this before you went and sat down. Can you summarize what the makeup of the committee is for preservation of county documents and records?
Well, I'd be happy to pull that together. I don't have it off the top of my head. I know that it's very well funded. I know that we put the budget in for it every year, and sometimes they use it, sometimes they don't. But we do have a set of documents and bylaws or whatever it was that this board, my predecessor, there was some issue, and my recollection might be that you were heavily involved in putting that in place at the
I
time.
remember discussions. I didn't have a direct hand in it because it wasn't the outside historic preservation piece. But really, I was just asking about the makeup of the committee
So I think the committee is all of the participating members, so the electeds, and that's basically what it's made up of, is it just the elected officials who participate in the use of the funds.
So conceivably, everybody who would potentially have county documents and records
That's it.
to, okay, all right. And so to me, that doesn't sound like it's necessarily a good model for the other fund, but I didn't want to rule it out before knowing what it was. So thanks.
So to answer your question, Mr. Davidson, I concur. I think you're on the right track.
So are you planning on putting this on the next meeting?
Yes, and then one other item I just wanted to discuss is Benton County normally does a grant cycle as an annual event, so they don't entertain grants to try to keep it kind of, not too drawn out. They put out the call for grants to be applications and do them as one batch. And I think there is the opportunity to handle something like something did come up in kind of a more emergency basis. But generally speaking, it is regarded as being an annual event to try to keep the workload down.
Okay.
So I would offer that I think it needs to be offered twice annually. And the reason is that we operate on a different budget than the state does, and there are grant programs outside our authority, actually some of them outside the state, that could hinge on whether or not an organization could get matching funds or supporting funds. So I would suggest that we probably ought to put out a call twice a year.
I believe this was the account that we used for the museum down here for the new steps, was it not? Yeah. Those steps were in need of replacement, and we used that to put the new steps, and they've got a new building up down there and looking really good.
Yeah, I think previously, I think we did windows at the museum as well, which just for those who don't recall, the building is actually owned by the city of Pasco, and the loan agreement stipulates that we maintain it. So that's why we funded those things. But it's not really our building.
So I just ask all three commissions to concur on this for Mr. Davidson to move ahead. And you got two of us.
Yeah.
Do you concur with putting this out twice a year? My guess is that you're going to get infrequent applications. But the timing issue, I think, is pretty important. And having written some of these applications and having worked with groups that have done them, I don't see it as a great burden to do it twice a year.
Here's the soon-to-be chairman.
Well, all I can say to that is maybe. I don't know if it might make sense to find in the historical community if there's matching funds and try to time that. But as far as, I don't know, it's hard to get committees together and get the work product out. We currently don't do any. I mean, it's people who know about it who actually come and ask for it. I know we've done some good stuff with the Air Museum, and they've done some different locations. But at this point, if we started off with one and then kept it on the list, or like I said, I'm not totally against it if it appears, if we checked with Benton and their experience or one of these other historicals, it could work that way. But again, even you bring up the O&M committee, I don't think we've met a couple times. It starts to operate, and then the budgets are set, and unless something comes up, people just come in and then the committee meets. So maybe it's a thing where you do one call, and again, you could do one-off meets if there's remotely or however we do it. So yes, it sounds like, it's going to be, hopefully the committee will be designed to serve. So if,
I think I can put some language together that could make it an option that.
I just don't want to commit to two and.
Yeah, but if I could, I'd like to follow up on that, because the inherent risk I see in one-offs, as somebody said, is that you have this call for projects once a year, and then mid-year somebody comes in, they said, I've got this no notice, short notice, whatever, and we entertain that. We're now competing with people who are going through the annual cycle for what are not unlimited funds. And I would ask people to consider, if you were one that was applying on an annual cycle and somebody popped up mid-year 4 months ahead of you, 6 months ahead of you, and competed for those funds, it might feel as though there was some special treatment there. That's what I was trying to avoid.
Sure. No, and I think we could try to get some language that would prevent any appearance of that at all. I would hope, and still address the need you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the main topic here was for the concurrence on the committee of 5. This could probably be brought up at the next meeting for discussion too.
When we discuss it, yeah.
Yes, and you could do some more research on it. So
I would just offer that I think that the other 2 appointments by the 3 primary members, there ought to be given some consideration or thought about maybe running those by the board, either for this board to approve or at least concurrence of the board.
Commissioner Mullen, you have anything to say to that?
No, I think we should move forward with it, so.
Okay.
And just look at the option, so.
Okay.
We appoint all kinds of other committees, and they're not committees that are actually expending county funds, like the workforce development appointments. We just did 5 of those. If those need to come to us, I would think a committee that's spending limited historic preservation funds, we ought to at least appoint those extra 2. The 3, the auditor, treasurer, and the county administrator, I'm fine with.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And once again, I know I did, but already, but I want to thank our county auditor for making those funds available for us to bring in the former county clerk that helped us with cleanup of that back room. We had a lot of old records, and she really worked no, nothing on you, but it was just a really good job of sorting through the records. She's an expert at knowing what needs to be preserved in the state archives. We're having trouble making contact with the state archives to get those records up to them, so I'm thinking about taking those up myself this week to Ellensburg and deliver them, because they're holding up the remodel of our new law library. So there's 14 boxes in there that has been identified as permanent records that need to go to the state archivist in Ellensburg, and all that was made possible by funding through that committee. And so I thank the county auditor for that.
Well, that's going above and beyond the call of duty there, Mr. Davidson. I got to thank you for that. So again, I ask all 3 commissioners to concur with what has been presented here to move forward. I have heard 2 of us concur, but I haven't heard the 3rd. Commissioner Peck, do you concur?
If the proposal is auditor, treasurer, county administrator, 2 additional people appointed by this board, and at least consideration of a twice annual call, then I'm fine.
So you do concur. Okay, we'll move on down to the commissioner administrator updates. Our consultant, do you have anything for today? Mr. Gonzalez.
Good evening, Commissioner. Good to be with you all. I think of note for everyone in the room, the legislature, they held a special session on the Blake decision. This was the law that essentially made using drugs in public legal. So they've altered that a bit, and it'll head to the governor's desk for final approval. Just some of the changes. This new bill sets the penalty for possession of controlled substances as a gross misdemeanor now, with a maximum confinement of 6 months for the first 2 convictions, and any fine for any conviction will be capped at $1,000. And then the bill also creates a system for pre-trial diversion programs to get people into treatment, which I think is a really good thing, so it made that alteration. The bill also requires mandatory early conviction vacation if a person in question can complete the treatment or have substantially complied with the recovery program. So there's some provisions. I have been working with the sheriff, and the sheriff's been working with the city of Pasco on our own ordinance. So we'll certainly take a look at this one and see if it goes far enough. And a lot of jurisdictions like Everett and a few other places have been crafting their own ordinance to battle the original Blake decision. So we'll just kind of keep you updated on what's going on. But certainly some big news there, in terms of the Blake decision, because I can tell you, as an economic development manager at the city of Pasco, this was a huge issue. You can go out to Peanuts Park during the day, during the night. People are smoking drugs, injecting themselves with drugs, and it's really frustrating, really, really frustrating. Some other things on the docket. On Friday, we had a really nice press conference in regards to the OPD crisis and the PA's office crisis, so great turnout. Thank you, Commissioner Didier, for speaking. Daniel Stovern from Sean's office. Sean wasn't able to make it because he was on some training, so Daniel did a great job. Larry Ziegler. We had 3 state legislators here, as well as our friends from Benton County. And I think this is something that we just need to continue to keep in the spotlight. I got a call from the governor's office today, and so it's on their radar. So they certainly know what's going on. So we'll actually start those talks tomorrow with the governor's office. And then we are setting up a meeting with our area legislators to I don't want to call it pressure, but just continue the conversation because, as I stated in the press conference, this is not a Republican, Democratic, Independent issue. This is all of our issue. And, the system is certainly crumbling, but I'm really pleased that the governor's office is being really active in the process and wants to engage. So, hopefully we can keep that ball moving forward and, just continue with the conversation. Some other notable things, had a chance to meet with Lori Williams and the Tri-City Herald staff recently, so had a really good conversation with them. And, I think, speaking of them, their coverage of the OPD crisis has been really commendable recently. Having been in the media, I know we took our shots sometimes, we're not always the favorite people, but Cameron's done a good job with that lately, really bringing to light some of the issues in particular with that. Also going to meet with the Franklin County Graphic in the coming days. So just trying to make the rounds with the media, really develop those relationships. As a former news director and media guy, I know that space. So sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know, and to be able to jump on the phone with them is always great and build those relationships. But I'm really busy and continuing to learn and spending a lot of time with Tim Anderson, who's been great on the budgeting side, just really getting me in tune with that and some of the issues that we have. So I think the next step, I've formed a strategic growth committee. We're going to look at some things in terms of, how do we operate in the future? Really look at short-term, mid-term, long-term goals and really create a strategy for the next 10, 15, 20 years for Franklin County. So that's really my next step.
Thank you. Great letter, too. Your newsletter is just incredible to read.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're staying busy. Commissioner Peck.
Well, I'm trying not to repeat some of these same things. Plake decision you probably heard enough about, although I'll note that I did read the draft ordinance here locally that takes a little bit different approach on these offenses. I was surprised that the legislature was as flexible as they were. There's an awful lot of space between the two political parties at the end of the session, and good on them for getting their heads together and finding a compromise that I think frankly makes sense. State Aviation Committee meeting this week, at a presentation by a group over on the west side at the TransAlta facility, looking to convert that to a hydrogen generation storage facility as a way toward moving toward, crazy as it might sound for some people, hydrogen-powered aircraft. There are some that have been built and are operating now, which frankly was news to me, and learned a good deal out of that. Had an opportunity to present to them that the production of hydrogen requires a consumption of a lot of electricity, and it requires water, and it requires land and space, and pointed out to them that the Hanford Reservation really has all three. We have a commercial nuclear reactor, we have a small modular reactor that's on the drawing boards to add another 40 or so megawatts probably. We've got Columbia River water, and we're centrally located, so that sparked a little bit of interest anyway. WASAC Virtual Assembly meeting is just a weekly update on what WASAC is doing, and that was yesterday. And that's what I have for this week. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen.
So last week we had the Ben Franklin Transit meeting. Ridership is up. Also had the WASAC meeting on affordable housing on Monday. Also, I'd like to make a comment on the Climate Commitment Act that took effect January 1st that raised the sales tax on gasoline and diesel, Connell Oil, Co-Energy, has been working with legislators and the Department of Ecology, and they've come up with a way that that would exempt agricultural customers and agricultural distribution from that sales tax, or that fuel tax for 5 years. So Washington State defines farm fuel user as a person who provides horticultural services for farmers such as soil preparation services, crop cultivation services, and crop harvesting services. So there's the opportunity there. If you're interested in that, Connell Oil does have the paperwork that would give you that relief from that Climate Commitment Act tax for the next 5 years. Also, just want to mention that Lars Larson, a talk show host, will be speaking this Friday here in Pasco. So if you want any more information on that, just see myself. And then also just want to say a big thank you for the sheriff's deputies out there that are patrolling Franklin County and doing a great job in keeping us safe. I think sometimes they get overlooked, and just want to say thank you for all that you do. And that is my update.
All right, well, last week, right after the meeting, we had the elected and department head meeting, which was well attended and great discussion. ARPA funds were discussed, as was the VEBA money and the insurance that we're getting currently, and how much it could be better if we had everybody participating. Ben Franklin Transit meeting, then we had our agenda meeting. The Ben Franklin Transit meeting, Commissioner Mullen already reported on. The ridership is up, but they're giving free rides to 18 and younger.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there was discussion about the fair and other big events, whether they're going to give free ridership for that. And I think the board pretty much said that no, we need to try to reclaim the funds that we're using to run those buses. We need to be charging for those. The agenda meeting, to set the agenda for this meeting. ARPA fund meeting, we had a meeting right after the agenda meeting with Shirley on the ARPA funds and where we're at. There was some panic up there from Hospital District 1. They thought they were going to get shortchanged on some of them funds that were committed to them, and we got that worked out. Then a meeting with McKinstry on the solar panels on the HAPO Center. The OPD press conference, which was very well done. Larry Ziegler did an incredible job, as he did this morning on the radio, explaining the OPD crisis and how we're going to get it handled. So it has been it was a very active Thursday, jam-packed with a lot of stuff that went on. And I'd just like to say thank you to Mr. Gonzalez for putting together a press conference that we've never had since I've been a commissioner. In fact, I don't think we've had one in decades. So, well done.
Thank you.
And way to get the word out. Our Across the River associates came over, and then, of course, they hire one of our OPD lawyers. So, I mean, that's just like, really? And they offered him quite a raise. I can't blame him for taking it. So that's my previous week. And from there, we'll move down to the elected and department head. Anybody from elected department heads I'd like to present.
This actually just came up to me tonight, as today. I would make a request that maybe between now and budget time, that the commissioners request a countywide survey of the flexible work schedule situation. We came off of COVID. We had the flexible work schedule. There's all kinds of data on things that are good about it. But one of the things as an elected in my office, I've had people request it, and based on the nature of my office, we can't do it for everybody that would like to do it. But I think, there's a whisper circuit around the courthouse, right? So you kind of hear what other people are doing or not doing, but there's not really a concise compiled document that says, this is what flexible work schedules look like at Franklin County across departments, across positions. And I think from a board standpoint, if it was compiled, everybody would know, and you would know, so you can, so you have some understanding of what the workforce, how it's changed, if it's changing, and what it takes in some of these positions. Like I said, I've individually looked into some of the surveys on it, and it in some areas it helps, and in some other areas the productivity can suffer. And so anyway, I'd be curious to know who's getting flexible time and who isn't, because like I said, my bargaining units and the people in my office would love to have that as well. And if it's something this board is okay with, then I can try to add that into holding on to employees as well. So I don't know, Mike, how we would do it, but I think you just put out a call that says, we can figure it out. I mean, I just think maybe between now and everyone's ended all the pandemic stuff that necessitated it, and now it's just kind of melted into workforce management and based on competition. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying it'd be good to know for this board and for me, who's trying to manage against, the policies that are being used countywide. I don't know. It'd be good to have it, and it'd be good to have the report available for, for the public to know what it looks like. So anyway, that's
So
my request.
this is an interaction now with, that's why I put this on the agenda or requested it, is for elected and department heads so that we can interact. When you come to the public mic for public comment, we can't interact. So your office, do you have a 410 policy or a 5-8 policy?
No, I mean, we're all there full-time. I think we have maybe one person who's flexible, works on the, actually, it's kind of a liaison position between the commissioner's office on the software. But other than that, I did lose an employee who was hoping for a good employee that wanted a flexible schedule, and based on accounting and the way we assessed being able to, get work done and productivity-wise, we chose not to do it. But I'm just, as auditor too, I mean, if you're spending the public's money on salaries and things like that, I mean, you guys are the gatekeepers to all funds, all public funds.
Yep.
And so it would be good to compile, so what, hours, I guess, that if people are working flex hours, I mean, it could be just hours on the front of the day or the back of the day. It could be entire days of the week. It's just data is all I'm saying. There's nothing I think it would just be good to know how the Franklin County employee workforce is changing post-COVID, so.
I think that'd be good.
could
to
be
look
by-
into.
Yeah, I could definitely work with you on that.
Wouldn't have to be super complicated.
No, I think the younger generation wants flexibility as some of our older employees transition out. But I don't think you can compare apples to apples on a job, because, as you know, some jobs, the necessity is to be there.
No.
But there are some jobs, and I've managed people when I was in the energy industry where they thrived at home. They were much more productive at home. So, it's also a case-by-case basis. So, but if you can attract a better employee and offer them flexibility, what I've seen at the city is 1 day off makes a big difference. If you're a 5-on person and you give the flexibility to have maybe 1 day at home, just the morale, it kind of gives you some time to work at home. So it really just depends, because some people don't thrive at home either. They go and they dilly-dally around, but some people are really focused at home. So I think you have to evaluate the employee and then set the parameters for each job, because obviously public works person, is on the road, or a frontline person at a counter. I've talked to Michael Killian about this, and most of his, probably 99% of his employees have to be there to process warrants, meet people at the front desk. So probably not feasible in his But to your point, the whispers, when you have one department that's not able to do it, and then why is that whole department doing it? It kind of creates discontent, so.
Well, and I'm not, it's a report. I'm not suggesting it be used other than just so you know, and at least static once a year, where everyone's at.
But
You know-
it's good to, it would be good to, really good to know, to pick people's brains to see where, see
Well, I
how
mean,
they
it just,
feel
I mean,
about it.
like I said, we have one that does it, and I don't know how everyone else does it, and it's, you know, I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem myself assessing that I couldn't offer it, and we didn't. But I just look at it and you know, and you hear different things, and so it just seems like if we compile, you know, you just put out a survey, what is your, you don't even have to put names. I mean, you're just gonna put positions, and this is how many are doing this, and this is what it looks like. At least then you'll know, and then we'll all know, so, anyway, thank you.
Hey, hang on, I think there's more discussion here. Is there anybody else like to weigh in
Yeah,
on
I've got a
this?
few thoughts for you now that Mr. Gonzalez is done. First is that we are in a battle for good people, and we're largely unarmed compared to other counties, financially speaking. We have a fine work environment. We've got a nice historic courthouse. We provide important services, but at the end of the day, people make decisions on other things, and a lot of times it's the intangibles. So, one, I think any sort of a policy that, well, first off, we need to have a policy. I don't know that it necessarily devolves to individual department heads to make that decision. I think there ought to be a countywide policy. Two, I think decisions about who and who does not work flex within a department should be the domain of that department head, in this case yourself. No one is better positioned than you are to know who you need there and who you can have somewhere else and when you can use that as an advantage in recruiting. Third is that I'm looking for a tactful way to say it, but I'll just be my usual direct self. You said it's really all about data, and I agree it is, but it's also about the intrinsic judgment that departments heads are going to have to make about individual employees. I don't think the capacity to work from home in a flex situation is a reflection of the nature of the work as much as it is the nature of the individual. And I hope that's tactful enough, but that's why I think it really should be the elected department heads who make that call. They know their team, they know who the players are. And lastly, we can't begin to execute something like this without working closely with the unions. I think everybody recognizes the need for bargaining those kinds of changes and effects. But appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, I mean, my response to that would be, I'm not suggesting a policy or anything else. I'm just curious. I don't know if someone came to me and said, well, you're the auditor, how many people are working from home in your county? I couldn't tell them. Could you?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's an
That's
excellent.
it. I'd like to be able to answer that.
I was just taking it a step
Oh,
further. I
okay.
think
Yeah.
your suggestion is spot on. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I'm just sort of taking a half a step forward and saying we're in a battle for good people, and this is another tool we can use, and it needs to be a tool that is wielded by elected department heads, not by this board or anyone else.
Agreed.
Commissioner Mullen?
I'm in agreement with Mr. Peck, but I will say that the public perception of people working at home is not necessarily looked well upon, I should say. But I do understand the needs for trying to find people to work and incentives. Everybody's facing the shortage of available workforce. And like Mr. Peck had said, I think it's up to the individual department head to figure out what they can and cannot do. For someone like myself to make that decision from the outside, it would be a free-for-all. So I think that it's up to the department heads to figure out what they can and can't do.
I couldn't agree with you more. As an elected official, the last thing I want you guys doing is reaching into my workforce. What I would say is kind of the sense you have of the public, I guess, was what kind of spurred me as auditor, is, yeah, if we're doing it and we should have the guts to put it on a report and show it to the public. That's kind of what I'm thinking, is that, and so, because it is very justifiable. I mean, a few weeks ago, I looked into the data on it, and the data was coming back, and you have, it cut out commutes and, the happiness and all this other stuff. And so, and there's clearly, I have, a lot of employees across different departments, and that's important. I completely concur with both of you. I don't want you to change the management structure at all. I want to be able to tell people, here's the offices where this is going on, and it's very clear. There's, Mr. Sand, it came up with him, and he's losing people. So absolutely, I completely support it. If he's doing everything he can to keep his ship afloat, and but it makes me wonder if someone said to me, hey, and then you follow that up with the public comment, there is the public comment that complains about the expense of public funds is, one of them represents thousands of them out there that don't have the time to come in. And so I just want to tell them, and if we can defend it, let's defend it. And I think we can. So I just think it's important.
Well, as a person that wants open and transparent government, I think it'd be good for us to get this survey done and put it out there for the public to see.
Well, or at least for you guys to consider when you're looking at, budgeting. That's it.
Mr. Davidson.
Just a question, if you're surveying the different departments, I think another good bit of data to collect would be comp time balance methods, especially when it comes to non-bargs. I mean, with the bargaining people, it's pretty well spelled out in the union contracts and stuff. But when you get to non-bargs, I know that there's some departments that maybe have different comp balance methods than others, and those can really accrue to be a liability to the county if they're allowed to get too.
Oh, sure.
Great.
That's a great idea. Well, and we have this other comp study going on, right? So I don't know. We just maybe do this all, wrap.
No, I mean comp time. Like
no, I understand that, but I
I
agree that we're kind of touching on these issues of retention and pay and how we hang on to good people. It's the same struggle every small businesses seems to be having, as well as governments. So anyway, just a thought.
Well, way to open a can of worms there, Mr. Beatty. Is there any other elected or department heads that would like to come to the mic? All right, seeing none, administration office business. Mr. Gonzalez, anything?
We do have to sign a quick claim deed. This is a follow-up to the Juvenile Justice Center in Benton County, MOU.
Okay.
So, as has been established in our previous meetings, we don't have any stake in the building nor the adjacent parcel. So, essentially, this is a signing and a codifying and, moving to the next phase of that. So the paperwork is right here. So Karen said we're going to have to wrangle you up if you try to leave the building without signing that.
Yeah, she already
So-
told me it's got to be done for the notary, so.
Yes, sir.
We'll get her done.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add to
Absolutely, Mr. Davidson.
Minister's comments, and we also, that quick claim deed does have legals on it, and we did verify those legals. Our assessor's office did run those to make sure that they corresponded with what they said they were, so they've been checked out. And they are just the small parcel that did have the joint ownership mentioned, so it's only that small parcel. The quitclaim deed does not cover the large campus of the juvenile, but I don't think that they necessarily needed the quitclaim deed to do that. Yep.
Quick comment. The quitclaim deed itself only covers the small parcel, which, Benton, Franklin, Juvenile, and so forth. The article or item 1, or A, alpha in there, does list 2 different legals, and the second one is the larger overall complex. But I think they just put that in there almost for a reference, because the land itself, Franklin County has no interest in on that. So just to clarify it. But we did review those legals, and they are correct.
And Karen, will the chair need to make a motion to sign that? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay,
There'll need to be a motion for the chair to sign
okay.
on behalf of the board.
Mr. Gonzalez, I'm looking at this quit claim deed. and a legal description is assessor's tax parcel number, and it ends with 5001. As I look at the map, the parcel 5001 is the large parcel. The smaller one that we, as I understand, are quit claiming is a different parcel number, and I don't see that parcel number on this document. Now, I suppose you could assume that the smaller one is subsumed in the larger one, but since they both have their own parcel numbers, maybe maybe you want to just take a look at it and make sure it's to your satisfaction.
And I'll come up there, but I believe you're going to find it in the legal description, not in parcel number reference. So the quitclaim deed legal description is the smaller parcel. The map will show the parcel by number, but let me walk up and just verify that.
Yeah, let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's parcel that ends in 5001.
Correct.
And here's parcel that ends in 4002.
Correct.
The latter being the small one that we're quit claiming.
Correct. And that legal that is here is 5002-4002.
I understand. Would you just read me the tax parcels number here, the number that we're quit claiming? Ends in 5001, which is the large parcel.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the
We verified
question.
legal, not the actual parcel number. Yeah.
Well, I'm not disputing that the legal is not correct, but it seems as though we ought to have the correct parcel number and the correct legal description, both, not just one of each. What's that?
We should.
Okay, thank you.
So do we need to wait on doing this?
I think you could,
We
you
send
could
it back.
you could even ink it or print a new one, or,
Send it back? Okay. Alrighty, is there anything else on the administration office business?
No, that's it.
Okay. So with that, we'll move down to our second public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because I ran out of time. The other thing that Mr. Mahoney was saying on the permitting process that he had changed in 214, which is actually 2014-123, that resolution. And what he did was made it so that the permitting process was all done on computer. A person didn't even have to come down, that they could do it all online. And I don't know if, because what they would do is then his office staff, according to what the recording was saying, of the YouTube recording of that meeting, was that a person, people in his office could just look at a map and help decide on the approaches. So as far as the approaches go, that, and then also in the original passing back in 2002-270, that one, I believe they were talking about that it was, if someone was building something, that they could get, it would be a combined permit for the road access as well as the building permit, so it would be done all at the same time. And I wasn't sure if, I know just with the stretching of everybody's budget, it just seemed to me that that would be a practice that we should still be doing, because that would stretch our county dollars and the time of the county employees. But I don't know if that is still the process that is being used. But the other thing on the opioid thing, I mean, it's just horrible. I'm grateful to know that it's been amended, and hopefully it will work. But I don't know, do we have a lot of drug rehab centers in the state? I know we're trying to get something here, and it's just, I didn't know if, I mean, if that's part of the new bill, that would be great, but I don't know, where do we send people that are trying to get recovered? And is the recovery process going to be good enough that it can really help them? It's very, very hard to get over. I know people whose children have died from it. And it's just so very hard. It gets a hold of them. The other thing that I really hope our commissioners can look at is the marijuana ordinances. There are no ordinances that I know of that are protecting children in the city of Pasco or in Franklin County. I know when Benton County and the Kennewick and West Richland stores opened, they made it, all of a sudden, marijuana use in the high schools and middle schools really just shot up. And now we have it in Pasco. It causes not only a brain damage and stunts the growth of the frontal lobe in children, it also increases at least by 15% schizophrenia in young men. We don't have a gun problem. We have a drug problem in our country. And that is what's causing these children to act erratic. So I hope that we are getting some sort of drug rehabilitation. It would, it's something that we really need, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
We do not have anybody on the phone.
And there's nobody for public comment, so we'll move down to executive session. I believe we have two, Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, sir. We have two executive sessions. This first one is under RCW 42.30.110, Section 1, Subsection D, review negotiations of performance of publicly bid contract. And this will be 15 minutes.
Okay. So we'll move into executive session.
You could, it'd be good to have you here. I mean, if,
Recess into executive session.
yes.
We have come out of executive session. We are going to extend for 5 minutes the same RCW. We will recess into executive session.
Because my almost 13 hours is up. I'm ready to go home. I gotta
Thank you.
take a glass of wine in bed.
We have come out of executive session. We're back to regular session, and I think we have another executive session. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, we do, Chair. We have a executive session, this one under RCW 42.30.110, Section 1, subsection I, to discuss with legal counsel matters relating to agency enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation.
How many
And
minutes?
I would say 15 minutes.
So at this time, we'll recess into executive session. We have come out of executive session. We're going to extend the executive session for 5 minutes. At this time, we'll recess to executive session.
that later, Mike.
We've come out of executive session. We're back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county?
No, sir, we are done. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I'll adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.